Michael Schwartz from Valley of the Suns, here live from US Airway Center with KTAR's Bryan Gibberman, replacing Adam Green tonight on our little show. Gibby, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Got to 82 games in the books. Playoffs are here.
So as Alvin Gentry said tonight, 40 and 42 just sounds a lot better than 39 and 43. Suns got there with a 106-103 victory. Fantastic first quarter, highest scoring quarter of the year, and then the game kind of slowed down.
Tim Duncan killed them tonight. They had that big first quarter, then Tim Duncan got going, had a bunch of and-ones, and the Suns really couldn't do anything to contain them. And really the big story from tonight's game was Manu Ginobili going down with an injury.
Very early, 2 minutes into the game, right back there, right behind us. You know, it's exactly the Spurs' worst nightmare. You see them rest all their guys last night against the Lakers, and then boom, right immediately off the bat. He's going to have an MRI tomorrow on his elbow, I believe.
At least it's his right elbow.
Right. But yeah, it's kind of the bad news for the Spurs, because this game, kind of meaningless. Sure, they lost the home court throughout the playoffs, but they didn't seem to care about that before. But yeah, that's really bad for them if it ends up being serious.
Yeah, and then from the Suns' perspective, they tried to win, but they didn't. They played his starters good amount of minutes. Hill 29, Fry played 36 like he always does, Gortat 35, Dudley 32, Nash 30. But Nash sat at the end of the game in the last 5 minutes.
Yeah, right. They went back to more of their normal rotations. They got in this Garrett Silers and the Xavier Dowdells the last few games, and now this is more what we'd expect if the Suns were trying to win. But that's kind of over with. We've seen this game didn't matter for the Suns. But Gibby, reflecting back, why do you think the Suns are where they are, 40 and 42, as opposed to going ahead and thinking about the playoffs right now?
Well, it goes back to the offseason to me, and it's not letting go of Amari Stoudemire. I had no issue with them getting rid of Amari Stoudemire. It was the moves that came after getting rid of Amari Stoudemire that killed this team across the season. The Hiru Turkoglu move destroyed the chemistry of this team. It hurt the bench. You couldn't really figure out whether he was a starter. They couldn't find a role for him. And then you had to make a move, blowing up this team, getting rid of your second best player just to right that, and that kind of where the season spiraled and went out of control.
Yeah, and they never could get that momentum. You talk about bright spots. From that trade, Marcin Gortat, just fantastic basketball. The guy became a double-double machine, became the rebounder this team needed, the pick-and-roll partner that Nash needed that they never really got in the offseason, but it just wasn't enough.
Yeah, the problem was you had to give up your second-best player and your best scorer in Jason Richardson to get that, so you lost so much that you weren't able to keep it together because Vince Carter didn't bring what they were expecting him to bring.
Yeah, certainly not. Now, looking forward, what do the Suns need to do this offseason? I certainly don't think they have a move in them to get them back to the contender status, but what do they need to do to at least become a playoff team, or what should they do? Should they go the other way and just straight out rebuild, have a couple of bad years maybe?
Well, that's the direction I would go, because this team needs a lot to rebuild. When you look at the roster, number one, now that they traded Goran Dragic and a first-round pick for Aaron Brooks, a guy who they aren't going to re-sign, that was a colossal mistake. Because you should have tried to get a first-round pick with Brooks. It shouldn't have been the opposite. So you lost your point guard in the future. So now you once again need a point guard in the future for Steve Nash. You need, even though they have all these wing guys, Grant Hill's on his last legs, Dudley, Childress, Peaches, these guys aren't real true scorers. They need a real true number one scorer to replace what Jason Richardson bought. And then you also need another big to go with Gortat and Fry. So those are three huge needs for this team that they're going to need to find a way to address without any salary cap space and with only one first-round draft pick now that they traded the other one that they acquired.
So you think that one solution to that is, my readers are going to hate you, keep Vince Carter. Why is that?
You're really going to go there?
Just briefly. We don't need to get into this.
Basically, if you keep Vince Carter, and this is going in, if they're going to do this whole Michael Finley thing with the CBA and let you cut two people, I would cut Josh Childress, and I would get rid of Hakeem Warwick as the two people to keep. I would keep Vince Carter. You're not keeping Vince Carter the player. How I'm looking at it, you're keeping Vince Carter the asset. I look at what the Houston Rockets got for Tracy McGrady this summer, and I see teams that are going to be looking to clear cap space and save money because you're going to have three players in Dwight Howard, Chris Paul, and Darren Williams who could be available. So you might be able to get assets in return for Vince Carter's contract instead of letting him go for nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I understand the logic behind that, but I don't know if it's going to be such the rush as in 2010 Obviously, the movie referenced when the Knicks gave up everything to get a shot at LeBron and Wade and all those guys. But I don't know if it's going to be the same kind of climate, depending on the collective bargaining agreement. I think you need to see what's going to happen. Is there really going to be an amnesty kind of thing before you can even think about that?
Which is that's what makes the move so confusing with my theory of them keeping Vince Carter. But here's how I look at it. There's no risk. This team's going nowhere in the near future. So if you could trade Vince Carter for a couple contracts that maybe go past next year, that are only a year or two, the Suns aren't going to be contenders yet then anyway. And if you can get 2012 draft picks in the move, and you can somehow find a way to get a building block in what is going to be a very deep 2012 draft with all the guys going back to school this year, that it's not necessarily trying to hit a home run. It's just trying to get something to start get some fresh legs and get this team younger and going in the right direction.
Yeah, I agree. 2012 could be a big summer between that draft if they can get any multiple picks. If the way things are headed now, if they do move Nash, this is going to be a team that has a top 10 draft pick of its own. That could be the summer where you rebuild. Whereas there's so much flux, we got to figure out what's even going to happen with a collective bargaining agreement before we can really talk about this team's future.
I mean, now, and the big question, and you brought it up
yeah,
right
Steve
there,
Nash.
is Steve Nash.
Yeah.
What do they do with Steve Nash this summer?
Yeah, that's a huge question. It seems like you need to rebuild at this point, and if you're going to rebuild, you need to go ahead and get some assets, because this guy is still a very good player in this league. He can bring you back a solid young player and a pick, I think, at least.
And where people are missing it with Nash, they say, oh, he doesn't have a lot of value because he's old, he's 37, but he's also an expiring contract,
yes.
Which is, in the NBA, expiring contracts are gold. Whether there's even with the new CBA, there's still going to be teams that are going to want to save money, and there's going to be teams that are looking to get under the cap. And how you get under the cap is acquiring as many expiring contracts as possible, so there will always be teams out there. And what you get in Nash is you not only get an expiring contract,
this isn't just an expiring contract.
It's
this
Steve
isn't Vince
freaking
Carter.
Nash. It's Steve freaking Nash also. I think there's a lot more value in Steve Nash than that's being talked about right now. The question is, do the Suns realize it? Because I don't know if the Suns front office is forward-thinking like Daryl Morey is and some of these other teams are, that they don't see it and look at contracts in that way.
And the year Nash had, you look at the impact rating, you look at some of the adjusted plus-minus things, this man had a fantastic season this year. He's 37 years old, but in a way he's still in his prime as far as being an incredibly effective basketball player.
And you're right, and how he finishes around the hoop now. Granted, he's not taking nearly as many shots as Derrick Rose and Russell Westbrook, but he finishes around the hoop at a higher percentage than them. But as I said, he's taken last time I looked, it was like 1.2 or 1.7. Rose and Westbrook are taking like 4.5 shots around the hoop, but it's still impressive that he finishes around the hoop, and you see it with his craftiness and how he uses the rim to block it because he doesn't have the physical stature. He's still there. You saw him, he got ran over tonight. I forget who did it, trying to take a charge. He still has value in this league, and he's still one of the top 7 to 8 point guards in the league.
No question. Well, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens the next time the Suns take this floor, what the landscape of the league and all that stuff.
In 2014.
Yeah, and what year it's going to be, how old we're going to be by the time that happens. But another season in the books for the Phoenix Suns. Gibby, thanks for coming on the show today.
No, thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
For Brian Gibberman, I'm Michael Schwartz. Talk to you all later.